I've had a lot of parents asking about the subtraction strategies we use, and I recognize that those strategies are very different than the way that you learned how to subtract when you were in school. I want to be able to show you today two simple things that we do to help kids be able to understand a little bit more, and then also just a strategy that you can use with kids every single time, and I don't think it's quite as complicated as some of the other things we do. Our main goal with everything that we do with math is just to teach number sense, to instill the idea that we know how numbers work together. We can count by tens, we can count backwards by tens, starting at any number. We can subtract 5 and be able to know that that number is going to be the same if I do 12 minus 5 to be able to get 7, or if I do 52 minus 5 to get 47. Those numbers work the same that way. I know it seems very simple on the surface, but a very common third grade mistake is a number like 200 minus 59. The kids will look at that and they will say, okay, 9 minus 0 is 9, 5 minus 0 is 5, and bring down the 2, 259. Our number sense should go off in our head and say, that doesn't make sense. We should be able to look and say, I started with 200. If I subtracted, the number can't get bigger. So we have to have that number sense there to be able to say, that doesn't make sense. One of the things that we do when we look at a number like 200 minus 59 is, instead of trying to teach that idea of ungrouping and going over to the 2 and crossing it off and turning it into a 1 and bringing the 10 over and then crossing that off, that's an algorithm that we can use as adults because we understand how numbers work and because we've done it so many times. It's just second nature to us. Kids have a really hard time with understanding how that algorithm works. They cross off numbers that aren't supposed to be crossed off. They make a 9 into a 10 because they can't remember if it's supposed to be a 9 or a 10, and it doesn't have any number sense with it. One of the things that we focus on is trying to just make the problem a little bit more manageable. When we have a subtraction problem like 200 minus 59, we just use a strategy called same difference when we subtract. If you don't change the difference between the numbers, you aren't changing the answer. If I take one away from here and take one away from here, I now have 199 minus 58. I can do that a lot easier. 9 minus 8 is 1. 9 minus 5 is 4. Oh, I get 141. It's a lot easier for students because we look at how those numbers work together and how we can make them easier to handle. When we add, we do something very similar. So if I have 199 plus 368, instead of trying to say 9 plus 8 is 17, bring over, nope, we're not going to do that. We're just going to use an addition strategy called give and take. It's very similar to that same difference idea, except instead of adding on both spots or subtracting in both spots, when we find the answer to an addition problem, we're finding the total. So as long as I don't change the total, I can have my numbers be whatever I want. I'm going to take one from here and add it to here, add one here, minus 1. That gives me 200 plus 367. Oh look, that's a lot easier to handle. I can get my answer of 567 without ever having to do any regrouping. The simplest way that we can teach subtraction is just reinforcing the idea of using a number line. I know that at first it seems a little confusing, but it makes a ton of sense to kids. If I have 436 minus 158, I'm going to set up my number line here. I'm going to start at 436. I'm going to jump back 100. That's the 100 of my 158. Gets me to 336. Then I'm going to take my 50 that I have to jump back. I'm going to make it a little more manageable. I'm going to jump back 30. And when we start out, we have kids jump back by tens, 5 times by tens. And then we start telling them, okay, we know that we can get to 306 just by jumping back 30. And then another 20 to finish out my 50 gets me 286. Finally, I need to jump back 8. So I'll jump back 6 to get to 280. And then just 2 more to get to 278. Again, I know this strategy is challenging at first for parents when we think it's just so much faster, more efficient, and easier to just ungroup and teach them ungrouping. It does become the most efficient strategy down the line. However, if we think about what makes sense to kids and we try to teach them something that they don't understand, they're fundamentally going to make mistakes because they're not doing what makes sense, even though we think it's the most efficient way. Now, some of your students are ready for using a standard algorithm to be able to cross off a number, ungroup, because they understand how it works. The goal eventually is that every kid can do that. By third grade, not every kid is ready to be able to think that way. I'd always be able to help you if you have more questions about this. Hopefully this is just something that you can do with your students. Have them show you how a number line works when they subtract. A lot of kids have used that strategy very effectively.